Imagine entering a cave 30,000 years ago. There are no electric lights, no roads, no cameras, no museums, only darkness. You walk deeper into the cave, carrying a small torch made from animal fat. The walls around you are covered in shadows. Then suddenly, you see something, a giant horse, a powerful bison, a wild deer, maybe even a lion, painted onto the stone wall. Some animals appear to move as the flames flicker across them. Others seem to disappear into the darkness. And then you realize something even stranger. These paintings weren't made near the entrance. They were created deep inside the cave, places that were difficult to reach, places where nobody would accidentally see them. So, why did ancient humans paint inside caves? Were they simply decorating their homes? Were they telling stories? Were the paintings part of religious rituals? Were they trying to communicate with other people? Or were they doing something we still don't completely understand? The truth is, we don't have one definite answer, but archaeological discoveries have given us some fascinating clues. And the deeper we look, the more mysterious cave art becomes. The first cave artists. Thousands of years before writing existed, humans were already creating images. They didn't have paper, they didn't have books, they didn't have cameras, but they had something incredibly powerful: their imagination. Early humans used natural pigments from their environment. Red pigments could come from minerals such as ochre. Black could come from charcoal or manganese-rich minerals. Yellow pigments could also come from ochre. These materials could be crushed into powder and mixed with water, fat, plant material, or other substances to create paint. Then humans applied those pigments directly onto rock. Sometimes they painted with their fingers. Sometimes they used primitive brushes. Sometimes they sprayed pigment around their hands. And sometimes they simply used the shape of the cave wall itself. A bump in the stone could become the back of a bison. A crack could become part of an animal's body. The uneven surface of the rock became part of the artwork. These weren't random marks. In many cases, the artists were carefully using the environment around them. Why animals? One of the most fascinating things about prehistoric cave art is what humans chose to paint. Horses, bison, deer, wild cattle, woolly rhinoceroses, lions. But here's the strange part. Humans are often much less common than animals. If these paintings were simply decorations, why were powerful animals such a major subject? One possibility is that these animals were extremely important to prehistoric communities. They represented food, danger, power, movement, and survival. Imagine depending on wild animals for your food. A successful hunt could mean your entire group survived. A failed hunt could mean hunger. So animals weren't just animals. They were connected directly to life itself. Painting them may have helped humans express their relationship with the natural world. But there is another possibility. The animals may have had symbolic meanings. A horse might have represented something completely different from a lion. A bison might have had a special cultural or spiritual significance. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly what those meanings were. They went deep into the caves. Here's one of the biggest clues. Many famous cave paintings aren't located in comfortable living areas. They're deep inside caves, sometimes hundreds of meters from the entrance. Imagine doing that without electricity. You would need to carry a light source. You would have to squeeze through narrow passages, climb over rocks, and cross uneven ground. Why go through all that trouble? If the goal was simply decoration, there were much easier places to paint. The entrance of the cave, a rock shelter, the outside of a large rock. But humans sometimes chose the darkest and most difficult locations. That suggests the location itself may have been important. Perhaps the journey into the darkness was part of the experience. Maybe reaching the paintings required a ritual. Maybe only certain members of the group were allowed to enter. Or perhaps the darkness made the artwork feel more powerful. Imagine standing in complete darkness, then lighting a small torch. Suddenly, a huge painted animal appears on the wall. The fire moves. The animal seems to move with it. The cave almost comes alive. For ancient humans, that must have been an extraordinary experience. The cave walls were part of the artwork. Ancient artists didn't always treat cave walls like flat canvases. They used the natural shape of the rock. Imagine seeing a curved section of stone. Instead of ignoring it, the artist might turn that curve into the body of an animal. A natural bump could become a shoulder. A crack could become part of a leg. The artist wasn't simply painting on the cave. They were painting with the cave. This suggests careful observation and planning. The artists understood animal anatomy. They understood how shadows changed what people could see, and they knew how to make use of limited light. Some paintings even overlap. Different animals appear on top of one another. At first glance, it may look chaotic, but it could represent different periods of painting or different layers of meaning. The cave wall became a record of human activity stretching across generations. Were the paintings used for hunting? One popular idea is that cave paintings were connected to hunting. It sounds logical. If humans depended on animals, maybe painting an animal was part of a ritual before a hunt. Perhaps they believed that representing an animal gave them some kind of power over it. Or maybe the paintings were used to teach young hunters what different animals looked like. But there's a problem. Many of the animals shown in cave art weren't necessarily the animals most commonly hunted. Some dangerous predators appear frequently, and some paintings show animals that may not have been major food sources. So the hunting explanation probably doesn't explain everything. It may have been one reason, but perhaps not the only one. Cave art may have had multiple meanings depending on the community, location, and time period. Could cave art have been spiritual? Another possibility is that cave paintings were connected to beliefs about the supernatural. Ancient humans lived in a world they couldn't fully explain. Thunder, lightning, disease, death, dreams, birth, the changing seasons, animals appearing and disappearing across landscapes. There was no modern science to explain these events, so humans created stories and beliefs to understand the world. Caves themselves may have felt mysterious. You entered darkness, moved underground, and emerged into another space. Perhaps caves were seen as special places. Maybe they were considered entrances to another world. We can't know exactly what prehistoric people believed, but the effort required to create some cave paintings suggests that at least some may have had ceremonial or symbolic importance. The strange handprints. And then there are the hands. Some cave walls contain ancient handprints. A person placed their hand against the stone and sprayed or blew pigment around it. When they removed their hand, a silhouette remained, a human hand. Thousands of years later, that person's hand is still there. Think about how incredible that is. Someone who lived tens of thousands of years ago placed their hand against a cave wall. They probably never imagined that another human would see it thousands of generations later, but we can. We don't know who that person was. We don't know their name. We don't know what they were thinking. But for one moment, they left a physical mark saying, in a way, I was here. Some researchers have studied the proportions of these handprints and suggested that women and children may have participated in cave art. The exact interpretation remains debated, but the handprints remind us that cave art wasn't only about animals, it was also about humans. Were they teaching stories? Another possibility is communication. Before writing existed, how do you preserve a story? You tell it, generation after generation. But images could help. A painted horse could become part of a story. A group of animals could represent a particular event. A dangerous predator could represent a warning. A human figure could become a character. The paintings may have helped people communicate ideas that were difficult to express through words alone. But we have to be careful. We can't look at a painting of a bison and confidently say, this is exactly the story they were telling. We don't know. There is no prehistoric caption underneath it. Instead, archaeologists study patterns, the location, the pigments, the animals, the tools found nearby, the age of the paintings, and how different images relate to each other. Piece by piece, they try to reconstruct the past. Cave art required incredible skill. Another thing we often forget, creating these paintings wasn't easy. Imagine trying to draw a realistic animal with almost no light, using primitive pigments on an uneven stone wall. And yet some prehistoric artists created remarkably detailed images. They captured muscles, body shapes, horns, hooves, movement, proportions. Some animals appear to be running. Others appear to turn their heads. Some look almost three-dimensional because the artists used the natural curves of the rock. This tells us prehistoric humans weren't simply surviving. They were thinking creatively. They were observing carefully. They were teaching skills. And they were communicating ideas. Cave art is evidence of sophisticated human behavior. Why did they paint in darkness? Perhaps this is the biggest mystery. Why choose a dark cave? Maybe because the darkness itself mattered. The paintings were not necessarily meant to be seen every day. Perhaps the experience was temporary. A person entered the cave, lit a torch, the artwork appeared, and then the fire went out. The images disappeared again. That makes cave art very different from modern art. Today we hang paintings where everyone can see them. Ancient cave artists sometimes place their work where almost nobody would see it. That suggests the audience may have been limited. Maybe the paintings were intended for specific people. Maybe they were part of ceremonies. Maybe they were meant to be experienced only at certain moments. Or perhaps the cave itself was considered sacred. We simply don't know. The artists were more like us than we think. For a long time, people imagined prehistoric humans as primitive and unintelligent. But cave art challenges that idea. These people could plan, they could teach, they could cooperate, they could create symbols, they could imagine things that didn't physically exist. They could communicate ideas through images, and they cared enough about those images to travel deep into dangerous caves to create them. They also had patience. Creating pigments required finding suitable minerals, processing them, transporting them, and preparing tools and lights. This wasn't something done casually. It required effort, planning, and purpose. What do the paintings really mean? And here's the honest answer. We still don't know. There probably wasn't one universal reason. Different caves may have served different purposes. Some paintings may have been connected to hunting. Others may have been symbolic. Some may have been connected to rituals. Others may have been teaching stories. Some may simply have been artistic expression. And perhaps some meanings are completely lost to us. Because the people who created these paintings are gone. Their languages are gone. Their traditions are gone. Their stories disappeared with them. All we have left are the images, the pigments, the handprints, the cave walls, and the archaeological evidence surrounding them. So, why did ancient humans paint inside caves? Maybe they were telling stories. Maybe they were communicating. Maybe they were performing rituals. Maybe they were preparing for hunts. Maybe they were expressing their beliefs. Or maybe they simply wanted to create something beautiful. The truth is probably more complicated than one answer. What we do know is incredible. Thousands of years before cities, before writing, before books, before museums, humans were already creating art. They entered darkness carrying fire. They collected minerals from the earth. They crushed them into pigments. They studied animals. They used the natural shapes of stone. And they created images that would survive for thousands of years. The people who painted those walls could never have imagined us standing there today. They didn't know their paintings would become some of the most important evidence of prehistoric human creativity. But they left something behind. A message without words. A story without a book. A piece of themselves preserved in stone. And perhaps that's the most fascinating part. Ancient humans didn't have writing, but they still found a way to speak across time. Their voices disappeared. Their names disappeared. Their civilizations disappeared. But their art remained. And when we stand inside those ancient caves today, for just a moment, we're looking at the same wall, the same animals, the same human imagination. And maybe that's why cave art still feels so powerful, because deep inside those dark caves, our ancestors left behind something that is still unmistakably human, a desire to create, a desire to communicate, and a desire to leave a mark, so that someone, someday, would know that they were here. If you enjoyed discovering this forgotten chapter of human history, subscribe to Tales of Sapiens, because every ordinary thing we see today has an extraordinary story hidden in the past, and we'll uncover it, one story at a time.